Hey everyone, as you can probably see, today we're going to be talking about our favorite green Naruto, but if you're a fan of anime, stick around to the end of this video for a super exciting announcement. Now that I've suitably piqued your interest, let's get to today's episode. I'll talk to you later. Well, I mean, I'm going to talk to you, like, right now, because I'm the one hosting this episode, but, like, you know what I mean. Look, I try to be a pretty open-minded guy, but can we all agree that My Hero Academia has got some really weird quirks on display? As Izuku said in the first episode of the series, all men are not created equal. Some folks gain the power to create literally whatever they want, some are granted the immeasurable gift of immediately copying other people's abilities, and some people can pull eyeballs out of their skull, but like they can't pull them out completely to do recon because they'd have to slice them off. And look, can we just agree that this guy has the worst quirk imaginable? Can anyone find a worse one? Anyway, look, while some quirks may be weird or gross or weirdly gross, nothing is worse than having no quirk at all. But it's an unfortunate reality for about 20% of the people in the show's world, as well as 7.5 billion of us in the real world. Enter our old buddy Deku. So as we all know by the end of this story, Izuku Midoriya will become the world's greatest hero, but he sure as heck didn't get there himself. He was originally a regular old dumb quirkless person like you and me. But here at Channel Frederator, we can't help but ask, what if? And this time we're asking, what if Deku wasn't quirkless? I don't mean what if Deku's quirk was hope all along or something dumb like that. What I'm asking is what if our Midoriya was part of the 80% of the population that did develop a quirk? What would his quirk be? I'm Jacob with Channel Frederator, and let's find out. This might seem like a bit of an obvious question at a glance, but there are a few different avenues we can go down, so let's start by looking at how quirks develop in the first place. It pretty much goes without saying that in the world of Hiroaka, quirks are in large part inherited from the parents, outside of really super rare cases. And based on some rather obvious case studies, you might assume that the way quirks are developed is like taking two Oreos and then smashing them together to create a super depressed double stuff Oreo, which, yeah, kinda. That's basically what happened with Todoroki, pretty much evenly adopting his mother's ice quirk and his father's fire quirk. They even make the point of mentioning in the show that quirk marriages are sometimes arranged for the sole purpose of combining or enhancing quirks. But there are a few hiccups that I want to hammer out just before we accept this as the hard and fast rule for quirk inheritance. It looks like similarities in quirks are to be expected in siblings. After all, we know that Tenya and his older brother share basically the exact same quirk, but if we shift our focus back to the Todoroki family, we often forget that Shoto has 3 older siblings, but for some reason Endeavor only ever referred to Shoto as his masterpiece, training him from an absurdly young age to surpass All Might as the #1 hero. The obvious question I have is, if the entire point of his marriage was to create powerful offspring, why would he wait until his 4th kid to put this plan into motion? I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure Endeavor said at one point that Todoroki's siblings were a disgrace or they lacked discipline or something, but like, I mean, he should be able to whip them into shape, right? What stopped him? Well, we don't really know what happened with the eldest son since we never met him. Or have we? Oh, what was that? Was that foreshadowing for a future cartoon conspiracy? But with Shoto's other 2 siblings, while we've gotten no confirmation as to what exactly their quirks are, I do want to focus on one other thing. Hair color. This is Shoto's brother, Natsuo. We haven't really met him in the show yet, so far this is kind of his only on-screen appearance, but you can see that he's got white hair. And this is Shoto's sister, who, like Shoto, has a combination of both red and white hair, but she's got significantly more white hair. Now, we covered way in the past back in our Loud House episode that white hair is caused by the lack of production of melanin, which is what contributes to hair pigment. But white hair isn't really a hereditary thing outside of special cases like albinism. And as if you needed me to tell you this, but it is worth mentioning, this isn't how hereditary hair color works. Not in our world, anyway. If you're the kid of parents with blonde hair and red hair, you don't end up having blonde hair with red streaks, which would admittedly be awesome, but that's just not how it works. Which makes me think that while, yes, quirk inheritance is hereditary, I think that the rules of genetics in this world are a little different than our current understanding. You might remember this from your school days, but the way that genes are inherited can generally be illustrated on a diagram that looks like this, which is known as a Punnett square. As we know, people inherit genes from their parents, but what the parents contribute aren't the genes themselves, but the variants of the gene that they carry, known as alleles. For each gene, everyone has within them 2 alleles that can be passed down to offspring, which can be categorized as either dominant or recessive. And as their name suggests, dominant alleles are much more likely to manifest in offspring since they basically take priority over recessive ones. The most common example of a Punnett square that you've probably seen would be one illustrating the likelihood of a kid having brown or blue eyes. The uppercase B representing the dominant brown allele allele and the lowercase b denoting the recessive blue allele. You can also see how the likelihood might change depending on which pair of alleles each parent carries. If someone carries both dominant and recessive alleles for certain genes, they're said to be heterozygous, while carrying only the dominant or recessive variant means they're homozygous. We're gonna do a buttload of logical leaps and stretches from here on out, and we're gonna kinda play fast and loose with these rules, but quirk science is an underexplored field, so let's at least just try to kind of understand it, even if it means breaking the rules a bit. Besides, we already found out on a previous Cartoon Conspiracy that everybody on this show's feet are weird, misshapen nightmares that are missing bones, so who even knows what's real anymore? Anyway, since gene inheritance seems to be somewhat different in this show, I'm willing to bet that hair color and certain other traits are somewhat quirk dependent. That the dominant and recessive elements of somebody's quirk can be identified through things like hair color and vice versa. And the hair color itself could act as a sort of visual representation of the disparity of the two quirks that were inherited. This isn't a perfect idea. With this logic, Bakugo's hair should probably be 2 different colors too. But first of all, Bakugo looks exactly like a kid I knew in high school who bleached his hair for no other reason than he thought it looked cool. And second of all, genes are unpredictable, and I have no other explanation for how two-toned red and white hair is a common occurrence in this family. Oh, it's because living with Endeavor is super stressful. Okay, fine. Why does Todoroki have his hair right down the middle? That's awfully nice of nature to take that symbolism into account. Besides, let's look at some other examples here. Tenya and his brother, same hair, same quirk. Jiro and her mom, same hair, same quirk. Earlier I asked why Endeavor didn't train any of his older children like he tortured Shoto. And while it's a bit of a shaky assertion, I also don't think it'll be widely contested if I say it's because that his older siblings didn't have the right fire to ice ratio in their quirk. If we use this hair color idea, we can see that his brother Natsuo and his sister Fuyumi have mostly white hair. And because of this, I want to say that white hair, as well as some sort of ice quirk in the Todoroki family, is the dominant gene. After all, white hair isn't considered a standard natural hair color in newborns of our universe. But looking at the 4 Todoroki kids, about 60% of their collective hair is white. The actual number is probably closer to like 65%, but forgive me for not doing pixel measurements on Fuyumi's hair. It's possible that Shoto is considered by Endeavor to be a masterpiece because his recessive fire quirk played more of a role than his siblings while still inheriting that dominant ice allele. Granted, in real life, this line of logic isn't foolproof. If you find a family where all of the kids have blue eyes, that doesn't make blue eyes a dominant trait. But in this case, we're running with what little information we have, and we're basically trying to construct a Punnett square for Deku. We know that Deku would inherit both of his parents' quirks to a certain degree, and thankfully, the show is mercifully straightforward with what his parents' quirks are. His mom can attract small nearby items, basically a weak version of the Accio spell from Harry Potter, and his father has the badass ability to breathe fire. And based on these 2 quirks, one of the most popular theories is that Izuku, like Todoroki, would inherit a somewhat equal combination of these quirks, manifesting in some sort of fire quirk, like pyrokinesis or firebending. Or if you're me, my first thought was throwing fireballs like Super Mario, but maybe emanating from his mouth, because, you know, fire breathing. To fill in Deku's dad's info on this diagram, since we've shown that red hair / fire quirks may be a recessive trait, we can make an educated guess that Deku's dad would probably be homozygous, possessing the same type of allele instead of 2 alternates, which is common in folks who are born with red hair since this variant most commonly appears in people with 2 recessive alleles. As a side thing, if you aren't too tired from stretching, we could use this to estimate that Deku's dad might have red hair. And no, that is not me subtly saying that I think Endeavor is Deku's dad. Not yet, at least. Now, what about Izuku's mom, Inko? This is actually where things are gonna get super speculative, like even more than we've already been doing. We had a reference point for Izuku's dad in the Todoroki family since they both possess fire quirks, but since we don't have a point of reference for anti-gravity quirks, Inko's alleles are gonna be a little harder to justify, so bear with me here. And before you mention it, yes, Uraraka does have an anti-grav quirk, but we don't really know what the other quirks in her family are, making this kind of a moot point. So here's what I'm thinking. If we stick with the hair color approach, we've already established that non-traditional hair colors can occur in this show. You know, cause anime. Now, regardless of hue, darker hair is generally a sign of a parent carrying a dominant allele. So we could assume that Inko does possess a dominant allele with her dark green hair. As for the final piece of the puzzle, since we're working with a hypothetical Izuku trying to figure out a quirk that doesn't exist, it's basically impossible to figure out. So if we draw out 2 different diagrams in which Inko is either homozygous or heterozygous, we can calculate the probability of Deku taking more after his his mom or his dad. When we do this, we see that if Inko is homozygous, possessing two of the same dominant trait, it's 100% likely that Deku would take after his mom over his dad. While if she's heterozygous, that likelihood drops to 50%. So if we assume the diagram on the left is true, Deku might not inherit a fire quirk at all and only have the ability, like his mom, to float things. And if in quirk inheritance, if both quirks have to be present, we could assume a tiny contribution from his dad, if any at all, like a slight resistance to heat, or maybe Deku would just really like spicy food. However, if we assume the diagram on the right is true, then Deku would be more likely to inherit a power closer to fire breathing like his dad. But if we combine both graphs, we see that regardless of what second allele Inko has, Deku still has roughly a 75% chance of inheriting more traits from his mother. With this about as taken care of as it can be, one last thing I want to talk about is his name. Might sound weird, but many of the characters in this show have names that are directly related to their quirks. Just as a couple examples from Class 1A, Mina Ashido's surname is pronounced very similarly to the Japanese pronunciation of acid. Tsuyu's name contains the kanji for frog. Tenya's name essentially means great runner. Kaminari's name translates to electric thunder. The list just goes on. So with that in mind, could Izuku's name give us any insight into a possible quirk? You know what, I'm not even gonna keep you in suspense. The short answer is no. His name, like his classmates, was conceptualized with the character's design in mind, incorporating the kanji characters for things like green, which, yeah, makes sense. His name also refers to one coming out of their shell, as well as makes several references to his possession of One For All. Turns out his quirk was the power of being the protag. I'm just fooling. Like I said, that kind of excuse, that's not enough for us. So let me suggest one more thing. His original name. The one he had when he was but a glint in Koei Horikoshi's eye. The character that eventually became Izuku Midoriya was always meant to be quirkless, but his original name before he got his haircut, which let us see his beautiful perpetually teary eyes, was Mikumo Akatani. And as somebody who doesn't speak a lick of Japanese other than what you would expect from somebody who consumes a disgusting amount of anime and memes, I did what I could in Google Translate and Japanese character databases to glean any meaning out of this name. And the kanji characters in this name that I found had meanings that very greatly related to nature. Valley, cloud, ocean, red. And look, you could come to probably any conclusion with this name. It's not like it was originally intended to give us a hint as to what Deku's natural quirk would be. This is all just a thought experiment. But with everything we've looked at, the inclusion of red as opposed to green, that's a pretty noticeable change. I think the inclusion of red could be interpreted as fire, an ability to control fire over land, sea, and sky perhaps. Would he be able to create fire in the same capacity as Endeavor? Probably not. But based on both this and what we learned when trying to unravel the genetic makeup of Deku's family, while I was joking before, I think Super Mario Fireballs is actually a pretty good guess when it comes to Deku's natural quirk. A fire quirk, but activated through his hands like his mother as opposed to through his mouth like his father. And incidentally, I think they would be more like Luigi's fireballs in Super Smash Bros. After all, just like his mother's quirk, these fireballs would be unaffected by gravity. I guess not only is Deku green Naruto, but I guess he's also green Luigi. But Luigi is already green, so Deku is Luigi. But there you have it, a quirk that's representative of both his father's fire powers and his mother's anti-gravity powers, with a slight skew towards his mother based on a mixture of genetics and quirk-based pseudoscience. But that's just my opinion on what Deku's quirk could be. What about you? Do you agree with our thoughts, or do you have any other ideas as to what Deku's natural quirk would be? Let us know in the comments. Also, time for that announcement I teased you about. If you've been following us on Instagram or any of our social media, you probably saw an enigmatic image saying that the Frederator family was expanding. A while back, a bunch of us at the office realized that we're all huge anime fans and we want to share that love with you, so we started a new anime channel. It's called Get in the Robot, and we're gonna have all sorts of awesome stuff there. Whether you're already a fan of anime or you're curious and you just want to dip your toes into the medium, we want to welcome everybody. Let's discuss some awesome shows and movies together. Once again, I'm Jacob with Channel Frederator, which loves you, and hopefully we'll see you over on Get in the Robot soon.